just like I believe there was something physically wrong with me, clients believe that this was the end of the world. There's no way the market will ever come back from this, or that they're going to continue to lose more and more money. And so once they're in that pain loop, that's where the knee-jerk reaction comes in. They sell, they go more conservative. They do the opposite of what they should be doing. They start getting more conservative as the market's going down, or they get out completely. That's why I like relating the two. So the back pain, just the change, the one quick change of perception, the change of my thought process literally changed everything. Just my lifestyle, my feeling healthy, my feeling, getting out of that pain, and knowing that I did it just by having a change of thought made me realize that, wow, that could be so powerful with investments as well. Any type of investments. And they're so interrelated. You have that knee-jerk reaction, you make a bad decision. It came from a state of unrest, a state of not knowing, a state of fear, intense fear. And I had those intense fear moments when dealing with this back pain. So this was my attempt to try to compare the two and tie the two together, because it made so much sense to me that all that pain that I went through with my back, and then coming around and realizing that it wasn't a physical manifestation. It was a psychological experience that was causing a physical symptom. Recording from my studio here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a born and raised New Yorker, now living in the South. Welcome to Confessions of a Financial Advisor, the antidote to conventional financial independence wisdom. My name is Al. I've been a financial advisor for over 20 years. I've worked with thousands of clients in all areas of the country and from all walks of life. Through the relationships I had with these people, I've discovered the mindsets and behaviors that are most effective in a person's financial life, plus the pitfalls and all the BS to watch out for. The financial independence community today has completely lost its way, and I felt it was time to call out the FI gurus, podcasters, and self-proclaimed pundits. This podcast is not about the numbers. That's what all the other financial podcasts talk about. We will focus on the emotional and psychological components that drive our behavior. I am not looking for new clients, and I'm not interested in running for any kind of office. I'm going to tell you like it is from an insider's perspective and pull back the curtain on the financial industry. Now, let's get into Confessions of a Financial Advisor. Episode 2, Healing Back Pain and Bad Investment Decisions. I'm here with my ghostwriter, Diane.
Hi.
Hi, Diane.
Hi, Al.
And this post was one that was real. Well, they're all personal, but this one was one that was an epiphany for me, which I've told you many times, I don't have many epiphanies in my life. This is the only one I could really remember. So the lead up to my debilitating back pain, which culminated into, full-blown back surgery. If I can remember the term, it was called microendoscopic surgery, where you're put under, and it's about an inch incision in your lower back. In my case, it was a herniated disc of the L5-S1 vertebrae. So the lead up to the moment of surgery and, to over a year's worth of just debilitating back pain. The timeline is a little fuzzy for me, but it started back 9 years ago. Went through a divorce, just very stressful time, which many people I'm sure out there have experienced. And in a complete daze, to be honest, in a daze of just not knowing what to do. I had a good job. I made a decent living. But, you're moving out of your house. Now you're living in an apartment. Your whole life just changes. You're going through just something that's ripping you apart emotionally, and you're trying to carry on with your life. Just kind of getting back into the dating scene after, 15 years of being with one person. It was just, very awkward, strange, stressful. Now I have a 2-year-old girl that I'm trying to take care of and have no clue how to do that. Wasn't really comfortable in that role as a caretaker. So it was just like a learning process. Before that, being married, it was, my ex basically taking care of the baby and me going to work. And that's, with a lot
That's
of
a big change. That's a big change in lifestyle and day-to-day life experience.
Yeah, kind of like a shock to the system where,
Right.
Now you have 4 days straight with a 2-year-old and you're like, what do I do?
Right.
Like, what am I going to do now with her? I have to kill 4 days. It was just all about the clock at that point.
Yep.
Just trying to run out the clock. So long story short, I dove into, positive things. I always kind of leaned on working out whenever I was going through stressful parts of my life. It was just one of the healthy vices I've always kept. And so I decided to enter a yoga teaching certification program. So I learned how to teach yoga over a 9-month period. It was a 200-hour certification. It was great. It was great. It was a tough time. Yoga brings out a lot of emotions because you're spending a lot of time in your own head and your breath, and you're releasing a lot of stuff. So it's very good for you. It just it brings up a lot of stuff. I began, while I was going through this, symptoms started coming out with just lower back pain. Like, I couldn't sit comfortably. I couldn't sleep comfortably. It was just excruciating pain. I can't remember the moment it started because I think it was a progressive thing, but it got to the point where I couldn't get away from it. It was just 24/7 thinking about my lower back and just, how am I going to get out of this pain? Going to physical therapy. So as many people out there who are dealing with lower back pain, in which I've ran into so many people since then, I can't believe what an epidemic it's become. So I went through the whole routine that everybody goes through. You go to the doctor, you go to chiropractors, you go to physical therapists. If that doesn't work, they put you on a small dose of pain meds. I think mine was called Tramadol. They didn't give you anything heavy duty. It was just to kind of curb the pain. And then, physical therapy, stretching, doing whatever you could just to kind of get through it. From that point, it's a system. The last thing you do before you get qualified to have back surgery is you have to have 3 epidural shots. So basically this goes across the board. Anybody you ever talked to before they had back surgery, they had to have these 3 epidural shots, which at that point, when you get to the point where you're doing epidural shots, you want surgery. You're in so much pain. You can't get away from it. It just takes over your mind, your life. You can't think straight. I mean, even, talking on the phone or trying to work, you're constantly in pain. You're constantly adjusting your body to get some kind of relief that it just doesn't come. So the only thing you want at that point is just to make the pain stop. So yeah, pain meds, therapy, epidural shots. Finally, you qualify for surgery. And I've never heard of one person that's worked for. I've heard that people have gotten a little relief from them, but it hasn't been a cure. But for whatever reason, that's the way the system works. You got to go through these 3.
That's the prescription that they give you.
You can't have surgery before you have these. So I guess, I'm sure there's circumstances when you can. If in a chronic kind of pain situation, it was the epidural shots. And so what happens is, of course, you do an MRI, and the MRI shows, where the pain is coming from, supposedly, where the pain's coming from. So they'll, on this chart, they're showing me this little black dot. The black dot represents my disc, and the disc is pressing on this nerve, and they've like literally pinpointed exactly where supposedly the pain is coming from. And I believe this. I mean, why wouldn't I believe this? I know nothing about medicine, and I know nothing about the spine and how pain works and all this stuff. I'm just in pain. I'm not a doctor. I don't understand how this works. So obviously you're listening to a doctor. He's reading the chart. You're just believing what he's saying. Why wouldn't you? So going through all this, and before the surgery, the one instance that I remember that I talk about in the blog post is I'm going to a yoga class that I'm going to teach at the YMCA. And it's early morning class. I'm there 5:30 a.m. I get out of my car, and as soon as my foot hits the ground, my back spasms like a bolt of lightning hits me. And this chronic pain, I literally just drop to the ground. And what you do is you're trying to stretch out because it's just spasming. And I'm literally laying on the ground in the parking lot, about to walk in to teach a power yoga class, to a group of 20 people.
And that's such a powerful visual. Like, I remember writing about that and just being struck by, oh my God, the ultimate irony, like that you're taken down in the parking lot by back spasms as you're about to go in and teach this power yoga class. Like,
yeah. And I couldn't get up. It took me about 5 minutes just to stretch out long enough to get that spasm to go away so I can get up, get into class, and I, in a daze, barely remember that class. I was probably just walked around the room and guided them. Usually I would do the class with the students. This one, I definitely did not, because I was terrified of having another back spasm. It was very embarrassing. I mean, how, think about it. I'm a yoga instructor. I look like I'm in good shape. And then I'm going to drop to the ground in writhing pain in a yoga class. It just, again, it was one of those things that it felt humiliating at the time, but it was like the embarrassment. Right. Look, like I'm a yoga teacher. How could a yoga teacher have debilitating back pain? It's almost, it's like the opposite of what you'd think a yoga teacher would ever have.
Right. Right. And the emotions of shame and.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, at that point, there was one last instant that happened. I was at home alone, and another one of those giant spasms happened. And this one was a lot longer. I literally couldn't get up. It goes off in your back, and it's just this lightning shock of pain that is just completely debilitating, completely immobilizing. And I was home alone, and there was nobody around, and I didn't have my phone near me. I was literally just laying there, terrified that the pain wouldn't stop, that I would never be able to, get up. Obviously, after some time it did. But at that point, I would just lost my mind. I was so freaked out and so at the edge. I was literally at the edge of my sanity with that, because I didn't know what to do. It was coming over me in unexpected times. I was terrified to go anywhere. And I just remember this panicked feeling of thinking, what if I had my 2-year-old daughter right now? I literally cannot get up.
Right.
And so I almost lost, I was to the, at my limit. And I think it was like that desperation moment where I got online. I'm like, I have to find out what this is. I got to figure this out. Somebody else must have gone through this before. Right. Did a ton of research, finally landed on, again, this is all long story short, but landed on this guy, Joe Sarno. And he has a book called Healing Lower Back Pain. There it is, very simple. And there's a couple of things he mentioned that just triggered the epiphany. It was just one of those, first thing I remember, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember the exact passages, but number one, he talks about, he's like, you do realize that there's women in China that are in their 80s and 90s that are out in the fields all day, like pulling crops and like
hard physical manual labor.
Yeah. Like on their hands and knees, like in the sun, and like, and they don't have any back pain, but you're a 40-year-old man and you have back pain. Does that strike you as odd? And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, that kind of makes sense. What? I'm not a 90-year-old woman. Like, and she doesn't.
What's my excuse? Right.
Right. Like, why? So yeah, it just started, the wheels start turning of why is this happening to me? And then he goes into like a little more of the physiology of it. He's like, you realize there's millions of nerve endings in your back or in your spine. And then he goes on to say that, if you took an MRI of just 5 random people, probably 3 out of the 5 would have some sort of like herniation or bulging disc. And maybe none of them, 1 out of the 5 would have pain, and the 2 others wouldn't. So there's no correlation between the physiology that they're talking about and the pain that you're actually feeling. And I was like, wait a second. I'm like, how is that possible? I thought it was physiology. I thought this was science. You're showing me it. It's physical. You're showing it to me. It's on this chart. You've done this x-ray, and now you're showing me where the pain is coming from. And I could see it. I could identify it. It's right there. It's right there. And you can cut me open and you could fix that. That's what I thought. That was my belief system. And then the last thing he says, which like blew my mind, he's like, what you need to do right now, he's like, you need to go outside, do some strenuous exercise. Like you need to just go for like a run. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I haven't gone for a run like in a year and a half. Like I've been like gingerly nursing myself.
Well, because the conventional wisdom for healing is take it easy, don't stress yourself, like walk gingerly and just don't overdo it. And so this guy is then proposing the polar opposite of conventional quote unquote wisdom.
Yeah, no fast movements. Like, don't do that. Oh, God forbid. Don't even roll over in the bed quick. Yeah, go run. Like, not even jog. Like, go. He's like, go do weightlifting. He's like, you got to change the neural circuit. You're on this pain loop, and you got to change this. You got to break this loop that's going on. And I just remember it, for whatever reason, it all made sense. And in that moment, I believed it like 100%. And I remember I tied up my shoes, went out for a run, still had all the pain. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I was taking those steps. There was a few jolts where I was like, ugh, real jolts of pain. But I just kept telling myself, it's not true. It's not. I remember just saying this mantra, like, it's not true. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're a strong person. Your back is fine. And from that point, I mean, it's been over 5 years now since, I guess the day that I went for that run. Maybe it was like 6 years. Again, time frames for me are a little bit fuzzy. But what I realized was that it's almost like a psychosomatic thing that happens that brings out a physical symptom.
Right. Like a physical manifestation of whether it's internal beliefs or mindset or ruminating thoughts, like what you focus on expands type of thing.
Yeah. Like,
and if you want to focus on the pain, you're going to keep reinforcing more of the pain experience.
Yeah. And the tension that you're feeling psychologically or internally is going to come out in some way.
Right.
Whether it's, back in the 50s, they used to say it was ulcers, right? Everybody had an ulcer back in the 50s. Like, if it's like that Mad Men generation, everybody's drinking and getting ulcers, and, that would, and then then the 80s and 90s come, it turns into depression. Nobody has ulcers anymore, but now everybody has depression, and now like the back pain thing is becoming like an epidemic like that. It's
so pervasive. Yeah.
There's clinics all over. I mean, I drive down the road. It's like the spinal surgery clinic and the, back injury. I'm like,
it's become a big business though.
Huge.
There is a lot of money in that business.
Huge business. So this whole post culminated from the idea that, wow, the same thing's happening like in the investment industry. Like when I talk to clients and they're telling me their hard beliefs, I've listened to the experts, I've heard from 3 experts and they said this is what's going to happen. And, now I have this feeling that, with the recession's right around the corner. So I really want to just cut my losses.
Yeah.
Or just, I want to lock in my gains because it's not going to go up from here. I'm like, wow, that's kind of what I did. I did that same thing, believing that my back pain was from a physiological impairment. Like there was something physically wrong with me. Pointed out to me from an expert. Here it is. It's right on the screen. You see it? I see it. I believe there's confirmation that,
and it came from an authority figure, the doctor,
the doctor,
quote unquote expert who must have all the answers because doctors never get anything wrong.
Of course not. Absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't know my own body, right? I mean, they know my body.
You're only the one living in your body, but yeah, that's, what do you know?
That's right. So it goes back to the thing we talk about a lot about beliefs, like we hold so tightly, those ones that are so like ingrained.
The stories we tell ourselves that unless and until we open up even a little bit to questioning their validity, they have a stranglehold on us and we aren't even aware of them.
That's a great way to put it. It's literally a stranglehold. You don't see it. Like you're just, it's a blind spot. It's like, you don't even,
absolutely,
you don't know you're in that story while you're in it.
Right.
Until you see this other perspective. For whatever reason, when I read a few passages from a book, that just, and you know what I think? I think like the desperation of that moment brought me to a place where I could kind of open up.
Where maybe you were just a little bit more willing to consider a different approach or a different perspective on it.
I think so. Yeah. Because I mean, I think back before that moment happened, I'm like, wow, why couldn't I just have that epiphany a year before? You know, like would have missed the back surgery, or would have, a whole year of like just excruciating pain would have been gone.
Yeah, if only I'd end my marriage, or decided not to marry my ex, if only I'd realized it 15 years sooner, but you don't see it until you're ready to see it. And yeah, if only I'd created this business, 10 years ago. But yeah, I wasn't, until you're willing to open up even a little bit more to shifting mindsets, beliefs, you're never going to have the ability to make those shifts and changes. And you and I've talked about a lot with clients, that openness and willingness. You don't have to be completely wide open, but you need to be a little bit open to considering a different perspective.
You do. I mean, we were talking about psychological flexibility. Like need.
I love that term.
It comes from there's a system called ACT. I don't know if you've ever heard of ACT therapy. It's ACT. It's acceptance and commitment therapy.
Okay.
So I went to a therapist of mine, recommended that I go to this conference that was for therapists. He wasn't going, but he knew of this conference, and it was ACT therapy. Yeah. And it's this guy, Stephen Hayes. Stephen Hayes wrote a book. Can't think of it off the top of my head. But anyway, he's the one that came up with ACT therapy, and he teaches this system to therapists. Mm-hmm. It has to do with cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's just a way of having mindfulness and being aware of your thoughts. Yeah. It's definitely Buddhist kind of based.
Being present in the moment and witnessing, being the observer, as opposed to identifying and grabbing onto the crazy thoughts. And
yeah, like one of the things they talked about is imagine yourself being a person watching you. So like you're like two people, and now you're the person that's just observing you.
Yes.
You're not the person in your body. You're somebody looking at yourself.
Right.
So it's almost like the second person. And that always made sense to me for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. It made sense that so all the thoughts that are going through my head, they're not really mine. I mean, I could look at this from an outside view and be like, look at it objectively rather than subjectively, that I'm always thinking like it's
from within it. Yeah. From taking more of and I think, isn't that why we hire professionals, to get a more objective perspective on things? I mean, that's why I hired my book editor. I'm like, I can't be the one to edit this. I lived it. I wrote it. I need someone outside of me to help me.
And you got too much invested. Yeah.
Oh, it's way too personal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole idea behind, financial advisors, real estate agents, personal trainers. Like of course you want somebody that cares about you and cares about your well-being, but they're not emotionally attached
to your stories or your beliefs or your mindsets that are so familiar to each of us.
Yeah. You want them to understand, but you want them to have that distance. You don't want somebody emotionally attached when you want somebody that has a business mind when you're in a business transaction.
Right.
I would think. I mean, if going into a house and you want it inspected, you want to make sure that it's safe and that, the roof's not leaking. And I want somebody looking out for all that stuff. And I don't want, because to me, I'll walk into the house and I'll be like, this place looks amazing. And look at the view out the window. And I'm looking at all the wrong things.
Well, and I was always the real estate agent who would tell people things they didn't want to hear. They're like, why are you pointing out the flaws? And I'm like, because I want you to get the whole perspective and not let go of the damn countertops. Like, stop. I mean, you're not buying a bathtub. You're buying the whole house.
Yeah. Or I love the idea of somebody buying a new car and they're like, oh, look at the cup holder. It's so amazing. I'm like the cup holder? Like you're spending $50,000 on a car. You worry about the cup holder. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. So again.
Well, and we talked about it in the post about the value of whether it's a financial professional or advisor, the real value is their role as an illuminator. And not just in illuminating truth, but in illuminating and helping to question what may not be true.
Yeah, you're not always just looking for direction of what's true or
Right.
techniques and strategies of what to do. You
Mm-hmm.
want to know what not to do. You want to know what to
Yeah.
look out for.
Yeah.
Again,
How
being
to avoid the pitfalls.
those blind spots.
Right.
That's and it's kind of the whole reason I've thought about this pose for so long. Ever since I've had that last episode of back pain, I've literally thought about this every day. Because I think to myself, I'm like, wow, I'm like, not that, I'm going to be the one that exposes this. I mean, this guy, Joe Sarno, was very famous back in the day for, this book that he wrote. But for whatever reason, I guess it didn't catch on, or people don't know about it, or people don't realize that, especially with something like so important, like having surgery.
Yeah.
This isn't like, like a little scratch.
It's not like a haircut. It's like invasive procedure.
Yeah, they're literally cutting into you.
That is risky. I mean, it's
very risky. They're putting you under.
Risk. Yeah.
Yeah, you're under anesthesia. You're doing the whole thing.
And what if they make a mistake? I mean, like that with,
with your spine.
Right.
Yeah. Hit something wrong there. And, yeah. So I thought it was just so important. And that's why, like I was telling you, I feel like an evangelist with this. Because anybody, and I hear, of course, it's one of those things also when once you have it, then you realize, so many other people had it. Like once you got divorced, you were like, oh, so many people that are divorced.
So many people that are divorced. Like, they're just everywhere. I never realized until I became one of them. And
that's right. So yeah, same with the back surgery community. So many people now, clients are coming out talking to me. And I must have had 4 or 5 clients over the last year tell me about either having back surgery or they're going to have back surgery. And I'm always talking about this book. I'm like, it's not going to hurt you in any way. Just read it.
Right.
If it does for you what it did for me, fantastic. If it does 0, then, no
then
harm
it hasn't
done.
hurt you. It's just,
Yeah. But those so I don't think everybody's going to have that epiphany that I had. And I do think it came out of the intensity of the moment that my mind was just like, I'm open to anything at this point.
I'll try anything. Just so at a point of such desperation for relief, and maybe that was then an invitation to be just willing to consider a different perspective. Like, I'll try anything. Like,
right.
Because it's such a vulnerable experience of being physically incapacitated, especially when you're home by yourself. It's like, what do I do? I mean,
yeah,
it's vulnerable.
And I think like the dark side of this, like the dark side of the whole back surgery thing is that there's probably people on, pain meds for like just years, like for probably like the rest of their lives. Cause they believe like, they have this back pain. There's nothing they can do about it. They're addicted to opioids,
That's a whole other topic of conversation, the whole pharmaceutical industry and lack of morality and ethics. But just give them a pill, write a prescription. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, and the way I relate it to like the whole financial industry is like the opioids or like that killing that pain, like it just dulling it.
Well, they're numbing.
Yeah. And numbing is for me is like the people that sit in a money market account because they're scared of the markets.
Yeah.
You're just numbing. Like you're not getting to where you want to go because of fear.
Right.
And so you're just basically turning off
and shutting down and allowing limiting mindsets and fear-based beliefs to keep you stuck and in the same pain loop and habit loop.
Right. Because it's painful. Like when you're losing money, it's painful.
Yes.
It literally is.
It does not feel good. It's not a fun experience.
Yeah, because when it's not happening, it's just a cerebral, like you could read it on paper. I'm like, oh yeah, 30% down, no big deal.
Yeah.
But when it's happening, it becomes a physical, like you feel nauseous. Like you could literally make yourself sick thinking about, I mean, again, we'll relate back to like the Great Recession, people losing their homes. I mean, that's huge. And that's like it's emotional. It's
a safety and security. It's like a basic human need to have a safe space to live. And when you're losing that, I mean, it's just shakes your entire foundation. And
you feel very exposed. Yeah, you feel very vulnerable at that point. And so with that vulnerability, people, they want to stop the pain.
Right. And I don't want to ever do that again. And And that actually was me right after our separation, for sure. I was like, I don't want to do that again. Like, and so no to any kind of relationship. But then that kept me stuck. It was important for my healing, but there came a point where it was like, all right, now you're just holding yourself back. Like, you can't just stay here forever. But
I always wonder, like, why the amount of time that it takes to get from one place to another. Like, why does it take all, like, you could make that choice right in the moment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, back pain, I could have made the choice at some point. I could have read that book and had that epiphany a year before I had the surgery, before I had all that pain. You could have chose to get right back out there sooner than later.
Right.
Why do we have to put ourselves through so much emotional turmoil to get to a turning point where, you know, we make a decision or we do what's best for us? It seems to be like that's a theme. At least it's a theme in my life. I think it's a theme in most people's lives, where to shorten those, you know, those windows. Like, are you going to spend 10 years after you get divorced not dating anyone?
Right. I mean, you can,
you
know.
Do you want to? Is that what's in your best interest? Is that good for you?
Right.
Why not wait a year?
So there's a question I love, like, what if? And, you know, our negative biased minds like to go, well, doomsday scenario. But, well, like with your experience with back pain, like that to me speaks to almost an epiphany of, well, if that wasn't true, what else might not be true that I've kind of blindly unquestioned? Like opening up and expanding, like, well, what else might be possible? Like,
Oh, it opened up Pandora's box for me.
Yeah.
It was just like, it goes right back into that book of opposites. So it's the idea of like, man, pretty much everything I thought of, I think might be the opposite.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Like, so I thought it was physiological, but it was psychological. That's kind of like the opposite. I mean, I thought it was this concrete thing I could see on a screen, but it was just something going on in my mind that was just like kind of
that was manifesting physically. I mean, divorce and a young child and a lot of chaos. You had a lot of other chaotic things happening at that time in your life. I mean, the amount of stress that those experiences bring, of course, why wouldn't they in some ways manifest physically?
Yeah. And I come from like a stoic kind of family that, you know, you just stuff it, just stuff it all down, just get on with your life. Don't show emotion. Don't try to get this out in any healthy way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like you said, the manifestation of it. The more you stuff it down, it's going to bubble over at some points.
Yes, it will. It is inevitable.
Yeah. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot, and I kind of learned this through therapy as well, was that back pain was more of like a panic attack of the back. Oh,
so, I love that way of explaining it.
And it literally like kind of came to me in a therapy session. I don't know why, like I had that thought, but it was like the same feeling. And I'm somebody that's had panic attacks in the past. Then I realized I'm thinking of the experience of both, like the panic attack and then like those debilitating back spasms. I'm like, it was identical. So like the panic attack was in my chest where you feel like you're short of breath. You feel like you're going to die. You just can't, you're hyperventilating. You can't seem to it's complete fear. And it was weird. The same sort of thing happened in that moment. It was like a blast, like a lightning strike into your back, which was so comparable in my mind to a panic attack. So I'm like, wow. So it first manifested as a panic attack. Now it's manifesting as I'm like, I'm starting to get it. And like to this day, even though I said I didn't have back pain up until now, I could feel when it's coming. Like I could feel a little twinge once in a while. I'm like, oh, and it's a trigger. And I think to myself, I'm like, something's going on. I'm holding on to something. Get your butt out, go for a run, go do some yoga, go walk around in nature. You have to now take care of yourself. So I literally, anytime I feel the twinge or any kind of like I can feel it building. Same thing with panic attacks. You can feel that anticipatory anxiety, and it becomes like a trigger where you're like, all right, it's
time to take a break and it's time to move or work out or express or allow these emotions, because they're essentially just emotions.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to know, even when it comes to finance, it's not about eliminating ever feeling fear, because you're going to experience some degree of fear. It's not about eliminating any amount of back discomfort or any amount of anxiety in our lives, but it's about what do you do? What choices do you make when you notice that starting to come up? And so it sounds like now when you notice tension arising, you know that the healthy way to move through that is to take certain actions that you have found beneficial to you.
It's true. It's become like an alarm bell or like a reminder.
An indicator, which is what emotions are. They're indicators. They're not good or bad. They're just indicators.
It's so true. And I honestly never knew that. I never knew that. I wish somebody would have told me that a long time ago. They are indicators. I always thought they were just bad things, like this
right.
is
Or that I'm a bad person for feeling this. Like, no, I'm having a human experience here,
or just fight it. Like, get rid of it. Like, I don't want this feeling. Just get rid of it. Not like thinking like, oh, what is this trying to tell me?
Right.
It's telling me something. It's just your body communicating.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's a lesson that it took me 46 years. All these like 46-year lessons.
35 to 40 and up. Yeah. The
35 to 40.
The wisdom that's available.
Yeah.
Through that time of life. Not necessarily for everyone, I would argue, but it's always on offer to us.
Very true.
Because you and I have had a lot of conversation about people who go through their lives just rigidly clinging to their old stories, their old beliefs, just never, ever reaching a place of opening up to questioning, blindly questioning. Well, that's the way it's always been done. Oh, really? Well, might there be a different way to do things?
Very true. So we were also talking about the religion thing and how we both grew up, we're both recovering Catholics. Yeah, I did the whole, communion, confirmation, baptism, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And my mom, even like people in my family would always say like, when I would tell them, well, I don't really believe in that. And they would ask, well, you have to believe in something.
Like they're horrified.
Well, horrified. Like,
what do you mean you're not choosing an option?
And if I tell them I don't believe, they're like, well, you're just young, you will someday, you'll come around and,
Yeah.
And I always thought like, why do people that have very hard, beliefs, very rigid beliefs,
very set in stone mindsets, and
they can't comprehend that you don't believe something.
Yeah.
Or that you haven't made a choice. Like it can't just be this open-ended, I'm still discovering, I'm still trying to figure it out. I think you are too, but you've decided to take this hard line. I'm just not
right. You've chosen to affiliate and belong to this group, and that's cool. Like, have fun with it.
Right.
But I don't need to check a box or belong to, I don't need a title. I don't need but it's part of people's identity in some way, in a lot of ways, I think.
And I see that's kind of where the problems come into play with whether it's investing, there's so many different areas of your life. If you're not open to, if you have this rigid, hard line, you're completely can be blindsided at that point because you're not open. You're not flexible. It's like the idea of like cutting water. Like you can't cut water. You can cut like a rigid tree,
Yeah.
Or like, I always think of like the palm trees, like, in the hurricane kind of thing, bending.
Because they're so incredibly flexible.
Right.
Right. And the trees that get taken down are the ones that are rigid.
Yeah. It kind of holds true for belief systems.
I actually wrote about hurricanes relating to my ex-husband. Like the hurricane's going to come through. There's blue sky behind it, I promise, but there's going to be some collateral damage and it's going to leave some debris behind. It's just a matter of how severe it is and how long it's going to take to clear it up.
Wow.
Let me go. I can create an analogy.
Hurricanes. Yeah.
Storms are going to happen in life. It's inevitable. Storms are going to happen in the finance markets. They're going to happen in the economy. They're going to happen in people's personal lives. Storms come through. It's a matter of how flexible are we willing to remain. And that's not easy to do in the middle of a storm. It's
No.
very challenging.
Yeah, because I think your knee-jerk reaction is to hold on tight, to grip tighter, tense,
Right.
lock down, and you start to realize that it's working against itself. Like you can't, especially when it comes to like an anxiety, like you can't, like the more you fight anxiety, the more it comes.
It gets.
It just gets stronger, which is so strange because like that means, your natural reaction to it is counterproductive.
Well, you and I've talked a lot about the fight or the flight survival instinct kicking in, and that's really dangerous to stay there because it's exhausting. Yeah, but it's all based in fear.
And then the opposite of that is just completely letting go.
Surrender.
Right? Completely. I mean, if you could literally do that at the moment, and I was telling you about my mom too with the cancer.
Yes.
How she was diagnosed with cancer 2.5 years ago. The oncologist looked at the pathology report, looked at me and said, listen, I'm sorry to say your mom's got, probably 3 to 6 months at best. We can't do any kind of chemo or radiation. This is 2.5 years ago. Still alive today. And I have to believe, it's hard to think of any other type of reason why she's alive except that her dementia is so bad that she doesn't even realize she has cancer.
It's not even a consideration in her mind. It's not even on her mental radar.
Nope. So there's no dwelling. There's no anxious thought. There's no, I have to get rid of this.
There's no fixation. There's no obsessing and reinforcing. And
so it's not even like she's consciously letting go. It's just not even there. Like it's off the grid. So
not that we want to encourage that people should be walking around with dementia-like symptoms. I mean, because that's not necessarily an ideal way to live either. But but it's a powerful indicator of the power behind our thoughts and our minds. And
and the power just of letting go, the power of not having any tension, whether it's emotional tension or psychological tension or physical tension. My God, physical tension creates all kinds of problems. But it's
counterintuitive to what we're taught, and it's counterintuitive to what our culture has led us to believe. And a lot of times, you and I've talked about a lot of our similarities in childhood and growing up, and those formative experiences, and healing from that, and the things that we pick up as kids are not necessarily truth. We think they are. And unless and until we start opening up to questioning some of those stories and beliefs, we're going to stay stuck in repeating them.
So true. That's probably a good way to end it, Diane. Yeah, that's exactly a good way to end it.
The power of mindset. This post, I think we talked about in one of the first episodes that you and I did together, is mindset. It's everywhere. The stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, we live in an alternate reality. Like there's a reality, and there's what we put onto it. It's like what we add to reality becomes our reality. It's so interesting because you automatically think what you see through your eyes is the way things really are,
is the truth, the one and only truth.
Yeah. Right? And it's all these storylines that go on in your head. Yeah. Well, we're going to parse through all these storylines at some points. I think every post we do has something to do with like the story kind of mindsets. It has that slant to it. Yeah. Like it all kind of ties back to this. What's going on in your head? What are you creating? Like
what stories are you telling yourself about? Even just, you can have an event that happened, and even if you're not arguing about whatever happened, what stories are you creating about the meaning of that? And that all happens within our own minds.
Yeah, and sometimes it's subtle. Like sometimes it's not
very often it's subtle.
Yeah, you're not literally like saying the words in your own mind. Mm-hmm. Like literally it's just this like in the background, there's just this story going on. And it's calming yourself down enough to like see what's happening. Mm-hmm. I think that's why people always, talk so highly of meditation. Just just slowing down, see what's like, start observing your thoughts. I mean, if you can't get any distance, you have no clue what's going on. You're unaware. You're
caught in the middle of a tornado,
and you
don't have in the middle of the hurricane. Yeah.
Well, Diane, thank you. I appreciate your time. Yeah, this has been great.
A fun conversation as always with two very seemingly disconnected topics. I love the blending of those.
Right. Healing back pain and bad investment decisions. I have to say, I hope there's no other blog post that with the same title.
I don't know. I haven't read any.
I have to think it's unique. Yeah. What's the title of our next blog post? Do you have that available? So we can tell them what we're talking about next week.
The next one that I have in line was Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins. Yes. I'm excited about that one. I have a long history with Tony Robbins. He doesn't know about it, but I grew up with Tony Robbins, and
you've had a long relationship.
A long relationship through cassette tapes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cassette tapes and Awaken the Giant Within, I think that was one of his first books.
We're dating ourselves because you and I both are familiar with cassette tape. There's a whole generation that doesn't know what a cassette tape is.
I mean, I literally wore those cassette tapes out. When you listen to them more than 100 times, they
eventually break down.
They break down, they fade, and the tape actually gets They had it's not like a disc. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not digital.
Disc. I'm saying disc. Yeah.
Even that.
Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week with our Tony Robbins posts. So we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.